What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 4 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Flip Screen Games' weekly video game podcast, all about Valve's hot new handheld, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Steve. Welcome back. We've made it 4 episodes. We're still here, still rocking and rolling, still talking about the Steam Deck.
Yes, and one of us without a Steam Deck. Mine's gone. It's gone away.
Mine's here, so it's you.
I know, mine's poorly. It's in with Valve. Well, I think it's on its way to Valve. It's completely opaque as to where the hell it is in the process, which I'll maybe talk about a little bit further in the show. We might save that for a future episode.
Yeah, I think it probably makes more sense to talk about it once you've gotten it back, and we can talk about like the whole process. But if we've got time at the back half, we can talk about like what went wrong and everything. But even though you are tragically without your Steam Deck, of course, there's plenty to keep you busy in the world of Steam Deck news. So at least you're able to keep, your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the Steam Deck world that way,
Yeah, I feel like it's back to when I was on the waiting list and I was in that Q2 batch, and I'm just like back to waiting, like, where's the email? Where's the email? Where's the email? Because it's got to go in for them to check it. Then, like, God knows how long it takes. So we'll see. I'm hoping I have it back next week because I'd like to check out Cult of the Lamb, which I know you're streaming this week.
Yeah, and if you didn't get a chance to catch that live, the VOD will be available over on our sister channel, Flip Screen Live, so make sure you go check that out. That's where all the VODs of our live streams go up each and every week, so make sure you go and check that out. All right, so we've got a good, meaty show to get into here. We've got the news of a Steam Deck booklet that's now available with a bunch of interesting little tidbits, some talking points there, as well as some a good jumping off point for the conversation around what is the future of the Steam Deck when it comes to design, because there was a quote in this booklet that said that they look at the Steam Deck as a multi-generational product line, which of course means that we will get multiple Steam Decks in the future that iterate on what we've already seen. So obviously very interesting, lots to unpack there, and we're going to get into that and more when we jump into the show proper here. But before that, let me remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of September. They are Christian Oliveria, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Mary Berry, Wakahula, and Zaid Ida. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all are the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of the newest addition to our fine slate of programming here on the Steam Deck Podcast. If you want to be like them and go show your support, head over to the Patreon, where you can get a bunch of perks and goodies, including early access to this show. And one more thing, our Patreon exclusive podcast, where we keep the mics rolling and we talk about things that aren't about video games, more often than not. So go check that out. Of course, it's the best way to support the show and get some extra content in your life. But there's a bunch of other free ways you can get involved, and you can find links to all of them over on flipscreen.games, where you can join our Discord. You can write into the show with our email, questions at flipscreen.games, and a bunch of other ways you can get involved. However you choose to do it, we thank you for tuning in. So let's jump into the conversation around the Steam Deck booklet. So,
Yes,
Steve. So give us the elevator pitch of what went down here.
Yeah, so Steam is Valve is heading to the Tokyo Games Show this month, and to celebrate their launch of Steam Deck in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Of course, they're going to be at the show, so they've got a big presence in Asia now. They're launching the Steam Deck through like a third-party vendor there called Komodo. And to celebrate the launch and to get people up to speed with who Valve is, what Steam is, what the Steam Deck is, if people aren't aware, because it's quite a small market for them over there, they put together this booklet which gives a little bit of history about Valve as a company and where they came from, talking about the inception of Steam back in 2003, all the way up to their launch of the first hardware product, which was the Steam controller in 2015, all the way up to now with the Steam Deck. And it goes into great detail about how it came to be. There's some really cool little tidbits in there that I want to go through with you in a minute. But I think if you haven't checked it out, it's well worth checking out. It's available in I think 6 different languages over on the Steam Deck website. So just head over to steamdeck.com. It's in the news section if you want to check it out. But we'll put a link to the English version in the description.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's about 50 pages roughly. It's like if you're looking at it as an ebook, it's like 25 or whatever, but it's like they're like two-sided pages. Like if you were actually to look at it as a leaflet, you know.
Yeah.
So it's pretty meaty. And like we said, quite a bit of information in there about the design of the Steam Deck and everything, which is really cool. It's interesting considering that um this is like a lot of this information is stuff that at least I didn't know that it was available if it had been made public in the past. So it is cool to see them kind of like lower the that like walled garden a little bit and kind of let us learn more about the design and all. I've got it pulled up
Yeah,
here on the
it's
YouTube
really
for folks
cool.
now, and you can see there's like a whole page actually where they show all the different designs that they had considered for the Steam Deck before they actually landed on the final look that we know today, which I
Well,
thought was really
one
interesting
thing
as well.
I love that they spoke about in there was how they ended up going through and getting to those designs. And they said many iterations on ergonomics and control placements happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, which required the team to ship prototypes to each other for testing. So they would 3D print these models in their homes, they test them out, they'd ship them between each other and kind of figure out what felt right. And it's just so interesting that this device was made during a time when the whole world was remote and they were still able to bring it together and ship a really, really successful product.
Yeah, and one that I think seemingly seems to have probably exceeded their own expectations.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so. Um, they clearly had to ramp up production to meet demand. I don't think they expected demand to be that high, or they'd have probably asked in the first place for production to be at that level. But
I
yeah,
gotta say,
it's really cool.
something I was really surprised by. What you gave the context earlier that that Japan isn't like a big market. I've never thought about what the PC gaming landscape looks like outside of the West, where Steam. Like I
Yeah.
kind of took for granted that everybody was just using Steam. Like I never thought about the idea that Japan maybe has an alternative or like doesn't, and PC gaming
Doesn't really PC game, I don't think. I think
yeah,
it's
which
more
makes sense because from what I understand
consoles.
about Japanese culture, like home gaming is not as common, right? Like
Yeah, it's handheld, right?
yeah, like a lot more people like are likely to like play while they're like on public transit or at least in city areas or whatever. And obviously there's been plenty of home consoles that have been very successful in Japan, so it's not to say that nobody's playing games at home, but like I don't know. I guess maybe the PC thing just isn't. It's not really a thing there, which is weird.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's
I mean,
just
I
you don't think
guess
about
that's
it.
the case. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that's the case. So they said in their announcement that they wanted to introduce our new customers to Valve, Steam, and the Steam Deck. So I'm guessing they feel that the market doesn't really know them all that much. And it does go into great detail about what Steam is and the fact that if you buy the game on Steam, it follows you no matter what hardware it is. It's platform agnostic. You can play it on your PC at home. You can also play it on your Steam Deck, and it just kind of follows you around. But we spoke about the Steam controller last episode, and it's kind of interesting that that's the one that they called out right at the beginning of the booklet. They kind of just say, "Oh, and we've also shipped VR headsets, and we've also shipped this, that, and the other." But the Steam controller is obviously one of the products that they're really proud of. And they go on to say that the idea of the Steam Deck began around 10 years ago when we were working on a Steam controller. Back then, there wasn't any hardware that would let us run AAA PC games within a handheld battery power budget, but we knew that eventually the right hardware would be within reach, so we began to build prototypes. So, like 10 years ago was when they started working on the Steam Deck, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, it really is. Um, and like I don't know, it's kind of funny because like like you said, it is interesting to see them kind of characterize the Steam controller as being like a stepping stone and a success, considering like I think it was probably a success for them creatively to like work on it and ship it, but like obviously it didn't connect with.
Didn't set the world on fire now.
No, and they know that.
Yeah,
They were
I
selling
do
it for
wonder
$1
if-
at one point. I think they know that it wasn't quite.
Yeah, it wasn't hit. It didn't hit where they wanted it to. I do wonder if it had a second stick on it and a slightly different configuration. Like ergonomically, I don't think it's a great design. It's kind of an inverted controller versus what you see on the other ones. Like it's concave on the front, right? I've never actually held one. I know you've played with one.
Yeah,
before.
it's like it's funny honestly because you look at it and you can, or I mean like if you've held it in your hand, you can see where the technology that went into like the concave like track pads that were
Yeah.
that is what that's the same technology that is in the pads.
Yeah,
on
and that followed over to the Valve Index, and
Right.
it's now come over to here, and they work so well for PC games that need a mouse.
Mhm.
It gives you that fine granular control. So I'm glad that they iterated upon that. But I just thought it was funny that at the beginning, they don't mention the Valve Index until like page 27. That's when it first gets a mention.
No.
But
It's on
the
it's
Steam
on page
controller's
14.
like, oh, is it?
Yeah, and the
But they're
lessons learned.
Yeah, but the Steam controller is like the one that they call out right at the beginning. The Valve's first hardware product was the Steam controller, and
Well-
other hardwares included virtual reality headsets.
Wow,
It's like,
no, they're all on the, go look at the page. It's page 14. They all got their own little paragraph.
fair enough, but like the
The
page
controller
one, right?
came first.
Page one.
For
Yeah.
sure. So that's I think like where they're kicking it off is like this is where our hardware journey began. I think that please, it's so funny too, like where they had the Steam machine that they're not even showing. 'Cause-
I mean, they didn't manufacture those, right? And that concept,
No,
I
they
felt like
partnered
they
with a
still
bunch of
want to
different
happen.
PC
Yeah, I know Dell and
creators.
Alienware were making one for
Yeah.
a while, but it seems like that's what they want to get back to. Because they also talk about their idea for SteamOS, and obviously we're on SteamOS 3. Those Steam machines ran on SteamOS version 1. And SteamOS has clearly come on leaps and bounds since those first machines. It's possible to play all of these games thanks to Proton now. Back then it was Linux-only games, and the games had to be built specifically for Linux, and it was really just a disaster because it was never going to happen. But they say we're soon going to be shipping a general installer for SteamOS, enabling any PC to take advantage of all of SteamOS's features. In addition, we'll soon be making SteamOS available for other manufacturers who wish to make a gaming device of their own.
What?
And we've already seen an announcement from Ioneo that they're going to make SteamOS available on the Air Pro when that ships.
Wow.
So we're going to start seeing other SteamOS devices. The Ioneo is significantly less powerful, but it has other niches, right? It's a smaller device, it's lighter, and it can really hold its own in like smaller indie games and emulation.
I have a question for you. The shipping of a general installer, that just means being able to use it as like your PC's primary OS, right?
Yep. So you'll be able to just install that
Interesting.
on any PC. Which is exactly what they were doing with the Steam machines. They want to get back to that, and this is kind of that gateway entry point was with the Steam Deck. Build out an amazing experience on Steam Deck with all of these awesome features with the Proton compatibility layer built in, and then ship it out and let anyone install it on their PCs.
Ah, that's interesting. I wonder if they'll actually end up becoming like a legitimate like option.
Like OS vendor.
Yeah. Like
I
so
hope
that
so,
it wouldn't just be like, oh, your options are Windows
Windows.
or Mac, and it's like, well, no,
I mean, and but for gaming, it's Windows only. Like at
Yeah.
the moment, that's really where you're playing.
right?
And I know you
Bonkers.
can play games on Linux, but I just don't think it's as easy and as nice as an experience as it is on SteamOS. And
No, with
they've
Proton,
already-
it makes it like you're running them natively, right? So it's like that's a huge because like Linux gaming is certainly an option, but like it's a niche option. Like it's you know it's a thing that takes extra work. Like if Steam can have Steam OS be like the a super easy de facto like Windows style, because like you boot up Steam OS on your Steam Deck and it looks exactly like everything's exactly where you would think it would be if you were on like any Microsoft
Yeah, you have like
platform.
the alternative to a start menu and things
Yeah,
like that, and you can just go through. Like it
and it
does
looks
have
like
a
Windows
nice
XP.
GUI.
Like it's like very
Yeah,
like light, bare bones, straightforward, very easy.
yeah.
Interesting.
I'm interested to see where they go with it. I think it's always going to be gaming centric because obviously that's their niche. But it's fascinating to me that they're still pushing forward with making
Yeah,
SteamOS open source and pushing it to
that's awesome.
be its own platform. It's really nice to see. And yeah, I don't think any other manufacturer or vendor would be willing to just be like, yeah, any manufacturer can install this on their device. And it really goes to show that they just want to own the PC market. They want to own the PC store.
I
And
think
why wouldn't you do that?
it speaks to the fact that they get PC gamers too, right? Like that's
Yeah.
like what the PC community is about, is like wanting to have control and being able to do things and like leverage the power of your community and like mod support, like all that kind of stuff, right? Like all that stuff is so like that's part of PC gaming, in a big way, is like that ability to um have a custom experience.
Yeah, they talk about the Steam Deck being hardware that's meant to be hacked, and they talk about some of the like
About how people have hooked it
hardware
up to like
mods
a
and software
VHS
mods. Yeah,
player and a Game Boy Advance camera and all that
yeah,
stuff, and it's like they're like, yeah, that's awesome. That's what we want people to do.
yeah. It's really cool. I think it just it, when they go on to talk about how there's going to be new versions of the Steam Deck, I've seen a lot of people surprised by that and talking about it being a generational product. But they have to have aspirations for that, and I know that this will become their first multi-generational hardware product when that happens, because obviously there wasn't a Steam Controller 2, there's not been a Valve Index 2. We didn't have a follow up to the Steam Link. Steam Machines died. It's nice to see them show that commitment when they're going into these new
I think it
markets and just be
speaks to
like,
the
no,
fact that
you
they
can
finally got
have
a hit.
faith. Yeah,
Because even with the index, like I know the index reviewed well, but I don't know how VR is such a niche market, right? Like breaking into that and competing with the likes of Meta and PlayStation and like all these other bigger companies that have more experience shipping hardware and more money to burn making this weird niche tech. Like, I don't know. I don't know if that was like a good investment for them, or if it played out the way they wanted it to, or if like they knew it was niche, so they're happy with how well it did, or whatever. But like the Steam Deck, I think, has proven that it has the capability of being like a mass consumer product in a way that I don't think most people thought it would. It appeals to casuals in a way that I don't think in a way that PC gaming historically does not, because it's like it's
it's clunky, it's cumbersome. It's an app installed on your PC that you sit at for work all day long. You're probably already sat at a desk anyway. Do you want to come home and sit at another desk to play a game? A lot of people don't. And that's why consoles are so successful. Not to mention the price point, right? PC gaming as a price entry point is even higher than the current gen consoles. Like, and we went over it on this week's Flip Screen Games podcast. The PlayStation 5 in Europe is €550 now, which is a lot of money.
you're spending
But
twice that if you want to get into
but you're
PC
spending
gaming.
so much more. Yeah, if you want to build like a decent rig to play PC games and fully take advantage of them, you're spending way more than that. But the Steam Deck's such a low entry point at like I think it's $350, €350 to get that low end model. And you can just get in the door on that like low price point if you want to. Um, and that's really appealing, I think, to a lot of people. You get a really powerful handheld device, and it's clear people like handheld gaming.
Just to clarify, it's $400 for the cheapest one, $530 for the middle one, and $650 for the top end.
Okay. I don't know how much it is in the UK. Um, but regardless, I still think that is a very appealing price. Yeah, UK it's 350. So I don't know how much it is in Europe, but in the UK it's 350 for that low end model, which puts it on par. Is it makes it £100 cheaper than a PS5, more than £100 cheaper than a PS5 now. And granted, it's not as powerful, but a lot of people don't care about that. They want to be able to play the latest games, and they can do that on here. And they want to be able to play them portably.
You probably can
They
on the
might be
lowest model, though,
commuting.
right? That's a conversation for another day. We're gonna do a whole episode about which one you should buy, but
The lowest mod. So there's a lot. I've seen a lot of confusion about this, and we did have a question that we'll get to in another episode. There's no difference between any of the models apart from the storage. You can play, they're all the same power, they're all the same specification. The only difference is the storage. There's slightly slower storage on the low end model. It's eMMC instead of NVMe.
right. But that's gonna pretty significantly impact load times. No,
Not really.
no. Okay,
If you've
cool.
played a game off of a micro SD, it's around about the same speed as that. And so I don't think it'll matter for most people.
There you go.
If you really want the premium experience, then you go for one of the other two with NVMe. Or if you're comfortable to do it, upgrade it yourself.
Cool. There you go. So now that we're, we know, right, that the Steam Deck is going to be multi-generational, and in the booklet itself, Valve asks, what would you like to see in a future version of Steam Deck? Let us know. I think that's an interesting question, because on the one hand, it being such a young product, like, I'm not thinking about it in that way. I'm not like out here like, I'm ready for an upgrade.
Wish list though, right? There's things I day one was just like, there's a few things that we could change on this.
For sure.
And I know you probably had the same thing. Like, I'd swap that screen out for an OLED in a heartbeat if we can get a similar size display that's an OLED.
For sure.
I feel like that would also help the power performance as well.
I think similarly to like what
the entire thing,
similar to what the Switch did when it replaced it, like getting rid of some of the
have smaller bezels on.
Smaller bezels. Here, let me turn the screen on so you can see.
Get smaller bezels to reduce the footprint of the device, and I do think it could do with trimming down a little bit in terms of weight.
Yeah, it's definitely heavy, and part of me thinks that like there's a way to get rid of some of the bulk on the sides and make it a little bit sleeker without getting rid of the form factor, because I think these supports are really important for like why it's comfortable to hold, but they're also part of why it's so fucking heavy. So it's not the worst.
I think a lot of the weight just comes from the heatsink and the components, and it just needing to be that heavy in order to pack it all in.
Sure.
You can see in the booklet they put out that they've got that tear down from the original video that they did, and it is just jam packed in there. It's filled to the brim. I don't think there's a lot else you could do without compromising. You'd either have to compromise on battery life or compromise on ergonomics, and I don't know that that's the right solution. But
no, and I think when you're talking about it, right, that's one of the number one things would be like better battery life, because the battery life is probably the worst thing about the Steam Deck when you get right down to it. Like, it's not, considering that like I don't really take it out to use it like when I'm out and about like that. Like, it's not that big a deal, but like if you were like in a car for a road trip or something like that, like depending on what game you're playing, you're not getting that much time on this guy, like when you're playing like a bigger, meatier AAA game, you're lucky if you get 2 hours, like you're playing something smaller. Sure.
I think you'll always, I've always managed to get 2 hours out if I lock it to 30 frames per second. But if you're trying to hit 40 or above, you may struggle for those like big AAA games. But another thing I think would really improve that is chuck a USB-C port on the bottom and have a proper docking station where I can just slot it in without having to put a cable on top. Because even the official dock, because of where the USB-C port is located on the top instead of at the bottom like the Switch is, it's going to make it really difficult. And even when I'm playing and charging at the same time, I've got this big cable sort of like stretching out the back, and it's sort of bending away,
making it even heavier,
really cumbersome. Yeah, and it's really irritating. Whereas the Switch is on the bottom, it's in a nice point. It comes out the bottom. I can plug it straight into a socket, or I slot it into the dock. And so my Switch is always charged when I want to use it because I just pull it out of the dock, it's fully charged. And if I had the same setup and same system with the Steam Deck, and granted, maybe I'll get in a habit when the official dock is released and we can give it a proper test. But I think that's one of
They
the
should just
biggest
make it where you put
improvements
it
for
in
the
upside
hardware
down.
I'd like. I don't want to put it in upside down either. I think that's goofy. I really think they could have put the USB-C port on the bottom, and I think would have been the right place for it.
I've seen a lot of folks asking for 2 USB-C ports as well.
I'd like that as well. Yeah.
So like maybe you put one on the bottom and you leave the one on the top. So if you want to like do the whole plugging it into a PC, like making it a PC thing, right? Like you could plug the power supply in on one, throw in a USB hub on the top so you could plug in a mouse and whatever, right? Like it would be nice to have something like that to kind of facilitate the fact that like, well, it is a PC, right? Like, and some people are going to want to use it that way.
Yeah, especially when they consider talking about in the booklet all of the different controller configurations they've seen people play with, or they've seen people play with dance mats on it, right? Probably playing Step Mania or something on here. You want to be able to dock it and have like another USB-C port free so you can plug stuff in without having to use a hub or something. So I do think that would make sense. Another thing I'd really love is improved haptics. They work, they're okay, but the vibration comes from the 2 track pads, and it can be quite weak to try and rumble it through the entire device. Whereas I think they could put dedicated rumble motors in, and it would have been a vast improvement. Like rumble motors in the actual supports, just like on, say, a DualSense controller, would have been great. And speaking of DualSense, I would love to have the resistive triggers and get support in for that, especially as Sony keep porting all of their PlayStation games over and giving them DualSense support out of the box. That would be something that would be really nice to have on the next iteration. But they're all like really nice to haves. I'm very, very happy with the Steam Deck as it is.
Yeah, I don't think that there's like a lot from a need standpoint. I certainly don't look at it and think like the way I think about like the Switch, where we're like constantly like, we're ready for an upgrade, we're ready for number 2.
Oh God, yes, yeah, we definitely are ready.
I think 2 things that come to mind. We talked about this, I guess, last week when we were discussing the Steam Dock. I think I would love for them to do something equivalent to what you were discussing about having the dock enable a kind of like souped up mode, right? Where you can take some of the pressure off of the system and put it on the dock, and then allow the console to output at a higher quality so that you can use it as a handheld when it's in handheld mode. And then when it is in docked mode, it's kind of going into a more like, power intensive state, because it's not having to like power the screen or whatever. And like, I'm talking out of my ass, right? I have no idea if that's how that works. But point being,
no, that pretty much that kind of would be how it would work. The problem at the moment is no matter where, if you dock it or you're undocked, it runs off the battery, so it can only deliver a finite number of watts from the battery pack to
right. And
the
you
processor.
said that would be great if you could allow the dock to be doing that.
If you could have the dock have like active cooling, so it would like tap in and actively cool the Steam Deck, and kind of bypass the battery, so it would trickle charge the battery while you're using it. But if you're using it, it would draw directly from the AC and draw directly from your wall socket. Then you could just utilize the full power of that APU. And at the moment, I think there's so much power just left on the table because it's restricted by cooling and it's restricted by power constraints from having to run off of a battery pack.
Right. Yeah. And if you could get some sort of connectivity there where like it is able to eke out a little bit more power and get a little bit closer to we talked about like on a software level how we want to see it get to a more Switch style experience where it kind of just knows you're going in docked mode and then can make adjustments. if we could have that coupled with a dock that allows the Steam Deck to, maybe hit the same bar as like the Xbox Series S, where it does feel like, hey, when it's docked, it's more or less equivalent to a next gen experience and quote unquote next gen experience.
Yeah, even if it only hits, I think 1080p rather than trying to target 1440, I think
like
you'll be very
if it
happy
can
with
lock
that.
1080 60 FPS with like standard modern games, like I think that would be great. Like that I think would be a huge W for them to like figure out how to make that work. Whether or not that's doable, whether or not they see that as a priority, totally different conversation. But that's something that I think would take what is already a really great experience and really like kind of elevate it a little bit. And then I think the other thing I would want to see would be a way for the Steam Deck or maybe Steam OS would handle this. I don't know. But like a way to take non-native games and have them have a more native experience on the Steam Deck without you having to go into desktop mode. Because I think that is something that is a little bit alienating for someone who isn't like for that more casual person that we were talking about, where like the Steam Deck does appeal to them because it's attractive and being able to do the PC gaming thing is great. But like now that we do have, like your Epics and, we've got the Microsoft Store and, all these other, and maybe PlayStation is going to have a launcher like we talked about on episode 2 or whatever it was. I would love for them to find a solution to be like, we found a way to make these games play nice with our hardware and accept like, okay, you're playing a game from Epic, but you're playing it on our machine. So like, fine, like I don't.
I wonder if they want that though, because
probably not.
I can't imagine they're making a huge profit on these consoles with the price that they're able to sell them at, and they're making that back in the traditional model. They're making it back in the game sales through their platform. They want to keep you in Steam. I do think though, in terms of software features, if we're going to go down that route of what we'd like to see, I would love to see integration of the Discover Store into the gaming mode, which is the store you go to. It's like the app store you click into in the desktop mode, and from there you can download things like browsers and emulators and things like that. If we could have integration of that into the gaming mode, where you wouldn't even need to exit gaming mode in order to launch some of these things, because it already prompts you to install Chrome or Firefox when you first open up the console, so it's already got some level of integration with it. It would just be nice if I had all of the apps that I'd installed available within Steam, even if it's in a separate tab, if it's like an apps tab, and I can like choose to put them into other collections if I want to. I think that would be a really nice way of doing it. But I agree with you. It's a very cumbersome experience to have to get Epic Games Store stuff on here. I'd love to have Game Pass integration at some point, of course. And you have to think that Microsoft would probably want that too, especially if this becomes a successful device. Why wouldn't they want their subscription service to be on there? And EA Play is already on Steam. So I kind of feel that Game Pass could come to Steam at some point, but that's not really hardware. Another route I think they possibly could go is different SKUs of the Steam Deck. Like have the Steam Deck, but maybe have like a Steam Deck Lite that's a little less powerful, that's more catered towards like indie games and emulation with a smaller screen and a smaller footprint. Or go the other route and have go back to what they were doing with Steam machines. Have a low cost machine that's like basically the Steam Deck components of $350 or £350, $400, but isn't constrained by a battery and isn't constrained by a screen, and it's just a device that targets 1080p that can use the full watt from the wall socket, and you just plug it into your TV and it acts like a console.
See, I feel like I would rather them figure out a way to make the Steam Deck that machine rather than trying to like make a separate SKU that is like, to me it's like the same argument as like the why don't they have a version of the Switch that doesn't dock, right? That like is just a box.
I mean, they do have a version of the Switch that doesn't dock. It's the Switch Lite.
Sure,
it makes no sense
why
it's called that.
Like a home version. And it's like, to me, I still think it's weird that the Switch Lite doesn't do that, right? Like it's like I don't understand why you'd want to remove functionality and like the idea of
Because
like,
they want
oh,
to charge you more for it. They think it's a value addition.
yeah, I don't know, I guess, right? But then it's just like, I don't know. I was skeptical about the Steam Deck, and that ended up being a good idea. So maybe it is a good idea for them to make like a second attempt at like the Steam box and making something that is like a console.
I think if anything, you're probably right, because I think Nintendo selling like what 120 million of them at this point.
That's what I'm saying.
It makes sense
Why
for
not just
them
double
to try
down?
and make the hybrid thing work. And if you can make it work, I think they'll probably try and make it work with this version and then improve upon it. The docked mode, as we spoke about in the last episode, feels like the missing link at the moment. But the other thing I think is missing is a Steam controller, and I really want them to make another one at some point. And I want them to make another one
I'm good.
with the ergonomics and the like controls that they've got on the Steam Deck, because
Yeah, I could see that.
those trackpads are great to play like Age of Empires and things like that. If I could play Age of Empires on my TV with trackpads that work in the exact
Would
same
you,
way
though?
as the Steam Deck, yes, I would.
But you never play games on your TV anyway because of like you're playing them on Steam Deck because you don't want to be on the TV. So now you're telling me you're going to take a PC game and instead of just playing it on a PC with a mouse and keyboard the way God intended, you want to play it on
So
TV with a controller?
So many games. I have played so many games from Steam Deck on my TV, and the majority of them are like horror games, like little indie horror experiences, like 1-2 hours long, and all of them don't have controller support. Not a single one of them. They're all mouse and keyboard. And so I'm there with my DualSense controller using the like slightly responsive touchpad that's on there. It doesn't really work anywhere close to what it is, because I like playing them with my friends, and it's the only way I can experience them.
Why don't you
'Cause
just
I
get a
don't have a PC
wireless
plugged into
mouse
my
and
TV.
keyboard and plug it in?
I probably should get a wireless mouse and keyboard. That's probably a good idea. But I was just thinking of getting a Steam controller, because I think that would solve the problem. But then you told me they're terrible. So I'd like a version 2 of a Steam controller
they're
that's
not
not
good.
terrible.
They're really not good. There's a reason they were selling them for $1. Just put it this way. You all know. Anyone listening to this show, anyone who's listened to this podcast for more than one episode should know I'm a mark, right? Like, it's easy to get me to buy a thing if I think it's cool or if it's a good deal, right? Look at all this shit I got behind me. For $1, I was like, nah, too much.
Oh my god, now I got one for $1. I want to know, like, let us know in the comments or write into the show. If you have a Steam controller, do you still use it? Did you like it? Like, I'd love to know from people who actually used this.
I would
thing.
love
Like,
to meet someone who is a defender of it, because
Yeah.
I do not own one myself, but I had a friend that bought, I think, 2 or 4 of them because he was very bullish, like, oh, this is exciting tech. Like, I want to support them doing this. And we tried our damnedest. We really did, but oof, bad. It was a bad experience. This was back when I was making Let's Plays, and I remember he brought them over and we're like, let's try them out and we'll do a little video. And we were like, no, we couldn't even get through it. It was just like, this is not fun. This is taking a game that we love playing on an Xbox controller and making us hate playing it on a Steam Deck or on a Steam controller.
And was it the second stick?
Yeah, it was just that the pads didn't work very well. They were awkward
But
to
they're
control.
better now. They're better now on the Steam Deck.
It's hard for me to say. I don't know if the you know what I mean? Like, it's been so long since I used them. Like, this was like 2015, 2016 when that came out. They feel better to me now, and part of it is probably just because like they're pads and they're not like weird concave. You know what I mean? Like, it was just awkward. Like, it was awkward when you're expecting a stick and you're like trying to like stick your hand in like a groove, and you know what I mean? Like, it was just weird. Like, it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just nothing else. There's nothing else like it with the trackpads that allows you to play mouse and keyboard games from a couch, other than a mouse and keyboard, of course. And maybe that's the solution. I used to back in the day when I used to have a Mac Mini plugged into my TV as like a home theater PC kind of thing, and I had this keyboard with like a built-in trackpad on it. Maybe that's the solution. I just get one of those things again.
Yeah.
And
I have 2 friends that have a gaming PC connected to a TV setup, and both of them have a wireless mouse and keyboard situation that they just like have in their entertainment center, the same way that they do like their controllers and their remotes, and they just pull that out when they want to play something on PC that's not, that doesn't have controller support.
Yeah. Because the other thing I guess you need is for those games that don't support bringing up the on-screen keyboard by default, you will have to do that like weird combination of like the Steam button and X.
Yeah.
I guess it would just be cool to be able to type on an actual keyboard. So I think that's probably the solution. And if anyone has any recommendations for a little keyboard thing, then let me know, because I'm probably in the market for one of those now by the sounds of it.
There you go.
But is there anything else you'd want from like a future version?
Not that I can think of, really, because like I think by and large I'm happy with it. I think we've touched on the things that make the most sense to me. It's like, can we make it a little lighter, better screen, maybe a little bit bigger screen, adding another USB-C.
You'd want the screen bigger?
Getting rid of the bevel would make it bigger,
yeah.
and I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's the same thing as the Switch, right? Like where it's like, we didn't make the footprint of the screen.
No, that did get better. But the screen did get bigger. Whereas what I think they should do on the Steam Deck is the reverse: reduce the bezels, but reduce the size of the console around it.
Sure. Okay.
So the whole thing shrinks a little
yeah.
bit to just like wrap around, because it is bulky, and as comfortable as it is to hold, it would be nice if it was a little bit smaller, I think.
The only other thing I'm thinking of, because I'm going through them in my mind, the speakers could be better.
You think so? I think they're phenomenal.
They're not great, I don't think.
Why? Have you had problems with them? Like, for me, they did an update where they made them even louder, and now they're just ridiculously loud.
Maybe I need to go back and try Jedi Fallen Order again, because that was the game I remember when I was trying to play that, and it was a game with like a lot of environmental audio and stuff, and I was like, this feels like really like small in a bad way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it always will. There's not enough distance between them, and they're tiny little drivers. Maybe they need to do...
You can't get any kind of like 3D pan or anything like that, and the audio's made for that, right? So like it makes it sound like compressed in a bad way, whereas like playing like something like Cult of the Lamb or whatever, like that's been perfect.
I don't know what you could do to solve that. Maybe what Apple does with their iPad Pro, they have 4 speakers on each corner. And so they can like fake the pan between it. So maybe you do like a 4-speaker system, which gives it a little bit more depth. Maybe that's the solution for it. But
I don't know, because like, I don't feel that way about the Switch. And when I play similar games,
maybe there's a setting in that game, because some games have like, what are you playing on? Like small speakers, surround sound.
I didn't think about that.
Headphones.
Maybe it was on like a surround sound setting as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something to think about. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot. I really don't. I think at this point it's like, how do you make it like sleeker, like a little bit like sexier, less bulky, like less like fucking, like to me this feels like the way, and not the same, but like the evolution from the Wii U gamepad, which looked like a Fisher-Price toy, to the Switch, which was like, this looks like a nice sleek piece of technology. I feel like this is like kind of between those things, where it's like, it doesn't look nice, right? Like you look at it and it's like, this looks like a fucking Game Gear. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's enormous.
It's utilitarian. I think it is utilitarian.
Yes.
Its form follows function. It's that shape and that size because it needs to.
And I think if you could get it a little closer to the other side of the fence, it would go a long way. But at that, it's like, I don't care what it really, like, it's like, I like it, and I think the experience of playing on it is good. That's what's important, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, it's all quality of life type things that they could improve on. It's like, yeah, it could be better. It could be more powerful. It could run higher caliber games at better frame rates, all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff I think we're actually going to see, right? Is like, Wave 2 will be a little bit sleeker and hopefully a lot more powerful, and like, and they'll just keep doing that.
I don't actually think Wave 2 will be more powerful. I think this APU is going to be with us for a good while. Maybe we eke out a bit more power in other ways through software, implementing FSR 2.0. We've got FSR 1.0 built in, but if we have FSR 2.0, then that behaves a little bit more like NVIDIA's DLSS.
You don't think it'll be like akin to like phone generations or something like that, where it's like, you get
I don't.
incremental?
I don't think AMD is on that trajectory. They have a very set roadmap of, it's RDNA 2. This is the architecture we're with for 5 or 6 years, and then we move on to RDNA 3,
Okay.
RDNA
Interesting.
4. I think maybe they have like minor improvements between them, but I think if anything, the improvement will be efficiency. So it will be able to get more battery life out of the thing, and I think they'll favor that over more power. I actually think it's probably going to be from the software side that we see those performance improvements, because even like Proton, it smoothed out stuff like Elden Ring. Like there was that jittering issue that happened on Windows, but Proton, they were able to go in there and in the compatibility layer do fixes for that game, and they keep modifying like Forza Horizon 5. I think someone who works on Proton really fucking loves Forza Horizon 5, because like every single time I go on like the Steam Deck news thing, it's like improvements for Forza Horizon 5, and I'm just like, someone really likes that game at Steam.
Improvements. It's like, it was already perfect. What are you doing? Absolutely wild. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see like what it ultimately, what shape it takes, and like how often we're seeing iterations, like, you know, how often the, you know, kind of quote unquote generations of these things happen, and like, are they going to try to incentivize us Gen 1 folks to pick up one during Gen 2, or is it more like, no, you don't need to upgrade every gen. Maybe you get 3, maybe you get 4, or whatever. Like that, I think is going to be an interesting conversation as the Steam Deck as a product evolves, and like what's the naming convention? Like, you know, like how are they going to communicate this to folks, and how much does it matter? I guess.
Yeah, like is it going to be a Steam Deck 2? Do they go down like this is just like the 2022 version, and it just keeps going? Like, this is the new version. But I'm trying to find out when the Valve Index came out to see how frequently
I feel like it was 2019,
they update.
2020 maybe.
I don't think it was. Yeah, it's 2019. So if it's even if it's 3 or 4 years, I feel like every 3 or 4 years I'll be fine to replace.
That's not unreasonable.
That's like a mid-generation refresh on a competing console like a PS4 or something.
Yeah.
You had the PS4 Pro 3 years in, so I could see that.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that at all. But we shall see. So, thank you all for joining us here on another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. If you want to write in with your wish list for a Steam Deck successor, please hit us up at questions@flipscreen.games. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe to the channel, follow the RSS, however you got the show. Thanks for coming and checking it out, and I hope you'll tune in for the next episode, because we've got a lot more planned here. We've got, like I said, we got a couple questions this week that'll flesh out, I think, our next couple episodes here. So make sure you tune in and keep up with all the stuff we're doing, and of course, check out our sister shows, and you can find links to all the places we are and all the content that we're making all over the web over on flipscreen.games. That's our website. Go check it out. Follow us wherever you follow us. Show your support however you can. And thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. I've been Pete. He's been Steve. And we'll see you next week.